Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. It started out as a pretty normal Friday evening. Mom was going to be out running some errands for a couple hours and had asked if I'd be okay staying home alone until she got back. I said I'd be fine. After all, I was a mature 8th grader and could look after myself for a little while. After Mom left to go grocery shopping around 5:30, I heated up some leftover mac and cheese in the microwave and settled onto the living room couch. I browsed Netflix for a bit before putting on a new teen drama to binge while waiting for Mom to return. Outside, darkness had just fallen and rain was lightly pattering against the windows as an evening thunderstorm rolled in. But I felt completely cozy and safe there in the glow of the TV. I was even a little excited to have this rare time home alone to watch whatever I wanted. In my contentment, I didn't even think to get up and double-check that the front door was locked after Mom had headed out. That oversight would soon come back to haunt me. About 40 minutes later, I was just getting immersed in episode 3 when a sudden, unexpected loud knock echoed in from the direction of the front entryway. I froze, feeling my heart start hammering. My first hopeful thought was that maybe Mom had forgotten her house key or finished up her errands early. But glancing at the clock, I knew she still had a good hour to go before returning home from the store. Uneasy, I paused the TV and listened closely. After a few tense minutes of silence, I tried convincing myself it must have just been a strong wind gust outside that I mistook for a knock. I was probably just being paranoid with Mom gone. I hit play to resume my show again, attempting to refocus on the cheery teenage drama I had been sucked into. However, just a few minutes later, an even louder, more insistent barrage of pounding on the front door jolted me to my feet. My stomach dropped. Someone was clearly outside demanding to be let in at that very moment. I stood paralyzed behind the couch, too afraid to look out the window or peephole. Then suddenly, a gruff, unfamiliar man's gravelly voice rang out from just outside the door, angrily yelling, "Open up." My blood ran cold hearing an aggressive stranger trying to force his way into our house while I was completely alone. The terrifying man continued shouting threats that he wasn't leaving until I let him inside. I staggered back from the door, my chest tightening in panic as he kept screaming and violently pounding away. Fumbling in shock, I rushed to make sure the door was locked as the enraged shouts grew louder. My hands were trembling so badly from the rush of adrenaline, I could barely manage to grab my phone and dial police. But just as I finally connected to the emergency dispatcher, the furious banging abruptly stopped. An ominous silence descended, which almost unnerved me more than the noise. Trying not to break down crying from relief, I shakily explained to the operator what was happening. They assured me a patrol car was on the way. As I waited in those agonizing minutes for the police to arrive, I sat petrified on the couch, clutching a baseball bat we kept by the door, listening for any signs the stalker might still try to find a way inside. Every creak and groan of the old house settling made me flinch. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, flashing red and blue police lights outside the window filled me with relief. I let the officers in and described in detail a horrifying encounter with the angry stranger at our door. They searched the property but found no signs of forced entry or any suspicious person still lurking about the area. After taking my very shaken statement, they said they would patrol the neighborhood overnight to ensure the volatile creek didn't return. They also admonished me gently about not leaving doors unlocked when home alone at night. I solemnly promised them and myself I would never make that mistake again. When Mom finally arrived back, she was beside herself with guilt and worry at leaving me alone to deal with such a traumatic situation. Though still majorly freaked out, I tried reassuring her I was okay now thanks to the police intervention. But a lingering sense of unease remained about who the terrifying man was and how he targeted our previously safe-feeling home. In the weeks following the traumatic stalking incident, I hardly slept, constantly imagining the angry stranger lurking outside my windows or finding a way to break in. Mom upgraded our home security system and insisted I go stay with nearby friends or family anytime she had to be out late again in the future. But nothing seemed to ease my heightened hypervigilance after that fateful night. Unfortunately, my paranoia and fears turned out to be totally justified when we eventually learned the stalker's identity from DNA on a cigarette butt he left in our bushes. He was a menacing stranger with a violent criminal history, who had apparently developed a deeply disturbing obsession with me after seeing me around town. Knowing this man specifically saw our house in me makes my stomach turn even now. The fact that he possibly had much more sinister intentions than just intimidating knocks and shouts still makes my skin crawl when I let myself think about it. We ended up having to take strict legal measures to ensure he stayed far away from both me and our home. The entire frightening ordeal forced me to grow up quickly and realize that truly no place is ever completely safe from dangerous people, even your own home. But with patient support from family and therapy, in time I was able to mentally process the trauma and gradually reclaim my sense of security. Nowadays I still make sure to double check locks and keep some kind of weapon nearby whenever I'm home alone. I've learned to always trust my instincts if something feels even slightly off rather than ignoring warning signs. While I hate that one stalker's vile obsession took away some of my youthful innocence, in a twisted way I'm now wiser and more vigilant after surviving his torment that night. I'll never forget that absolutely harrowing night from my teenage years when I was home alone and accidentally overheard some strangers were outside my house plotting to break in after my parents left for dinner. Though it happened over a decade ago now, the memory of helplessly cowering in fear downstairs while potential robbers staked out our home still feels vividly burned into my mind. It started out as a pretty average Saturday evening. Mom and Dad were going on a rare dinner date night to celebrate their anniversary and assumed they'd be perfectly fine watching myself for a few hours. I was 15 already after all, and accustomed to short stints home alone. They headed out to the restaurant around 6 p.m. after reminding me one last time to lock up securely and not open or respond if anyone stopped by. After they left, I ordered a pepperoni pizza for delivery and camped out cosily on the living room couch, channel surfing and excited to have the whole house to myself for a night of junk food and unsupervised tea. As dusk fell outside, I did a thorough sweep of all the doors and windows to make sure everything was tightly locked up. A couple hours later, as I was completely absorbed in an intense movie climax, I thought I faintly heard two male voices murmuring just outside. I quickly paused the TV to listen closely, but the sound had stopped. I assumed it must be our neighbors out in their backyard having a chat. Just to be safe, though, I crept over and discreetly peeked through the curtains into the moonlit night. Nothing seemed to miss outside, so I chalked it up to hearing things and settled comfortably back onto the couch. But barely a minute later, I froze as an unfamiliar, gruff male voice spoke loudly and clearly right underneath my open living room window. My blood instantly turned to ice in my veins as the severity of the situation dawned on me. There was a complete stranger standing mere feet away just outside in our backyard, loudly plotting in graphic detail how he and accomplice planned to break into my house later that very night, as soon as my rich and dumb parents finally left for dinner. I sat stiff as a wooden board on the couch, my heart pounding out of my chest, as I was forced to listen to this man arrogantly explain his twisted plans to his partner. He pointed out just how pathetically easy it would be for them to bust through our flimsy back door. He described how they could quickly overpower and restrain me since I was just an average-sized teen girl home all alone. He sounded eerily confident that they would easily be able to ransack the place for valuables from my mom's jewelry box to my dad's home office safe. The longer he spoke, the more intricate and deranged his heist plans became. He talked eagerly about scoring big on electronics, cash, and my mom's expensive jewelry that they could quickly pawn off for drug money. He kept insisting to his partner what a massive cash windfall this would be with minimal effort on their part, as if violating and terrorizing a young girl was trivial compared to funding their addiction for a few weeks. I sat there listening to every chilling word, my hands trembling violently in my lap. The reality of the situation kept hitting me over and over. This twisted monster was casually discussing invading and destroying the safety of our home, utterly oblivious that I sat paralyzed and helpless just on the other side of the flimsy glass pane. One thin window separated me from these ruthless, unhinged criminals plotting my imminent trauma for their own selfish gain. I had never felt so exposed and powerless in my life as in those agonizing moments, forcibly overhearing this animal describe my house as an easy target, and me as a meaningless object to be quickly discarded once they took what they wanted from my home. 1,000 panicked thoughts raced through my mind all at once. How could I possibly defend myself against these ruthless, frenzied drug addicts? Why did they choose our home? How long would they make me suffer once they captured me? But I could barely breathe, let alone cry for help. for fear they might hear me and expedite their twisted fantasy. Desperate but too fearful to peek outside again or even sneak away lest they hear me, I frantically weighed my very limited options. I didn't dare try calling the police for help in case the men overheard and escalated their plans. All I could do was sit there in choking silence, praying they would finish scheming soon and leave before my parents got home. But instead, the plotting stranger kept vigil directly under my window, lingering menacingly as if standing guard to wait for the optimal moment to strike. The minutes crawled by at an agonizing pace, each one stripping away another layer of my courage as I helplessly listened to this ominous presence leering right outside in the darkness. After what felt like an eternity of being mentally tortured by his twisted scheming and unchecked power over me, I finally detected shuffling footsteps retreating from the window. I heard the gruff voice chuckle about the cash windfall to come before their voices faded into the distance. I sagged in momentary relief, thinking maybe they had given up for the night, but I knew they could return again at any moment if my parents didn't get back first. Those next 20 agonizing minutes I spent waiting for Mom and Dad were undoubtedly the longest and most terrifying of my life up to that point. I sat rigid and alert on the couch, baseball bat clenched in my palms, jumping at every leaf scrape and branch creak outside. Each passing minute without headlights pulling in the driveway ratcheted up my conviction that the men were about to re-emerge from the shadows to make good on their plans. When my parents' car finally did pull in, the powerful wave of relief that washed over me was indescribable. But I was still trembling and nearly in hysterics as I tried explaining what happened in gasping breaths. We immediately called the police, but by the time they swept the area, the would-be burglars were long gone without a trace. I'll never forget coming home from work one mundane weeknight last year to discover my house to have been completely ransacked and my bedroom burglarized while my younger brother was away on a tropical spring break vacation. The chilling sense of violation I felt first glimpsing the absolute wreckage the intruder left upstairs still gives me chills when I think back on it even now. Started out as just another typically long Tuesday shift at the office, spending hours staring at spreadsheets on my computer. My 19-year-old brother had left the day before for a big, all-inclusive resort getaway in Mexico with a bunch of his high school buddies for spring break. So I knew as I pulled into the driveway a little after 6 p.m. that the house would be empty and quiet when I returned. Everything seemed perfectly normal and undisturbed from the outside as I approached. All the doors and windows appeared sealed up tight, with no signs of forced entry that I could detect. Letting myself in through the front door, I quickly kicked off my heels and changed into comfy sweatpants and an old t-shirt, looking forward to unwinding after such a marathon workday. As I started heating up the previous night's leftover spaghetti in the microwave for a quick solo dinner, I thought I faintly heard a muffled creaking overhead, like floorboards settling. I paused, straining my ears in the silence to listen closely. Probably just the house easing in the evening breeze, I tried assuring myself. But when the creaking repeated again a few moments later, louder and somehow more deliberate, my heart plunged into my stomach. Someone was very clearly moving around on the floor above me. My first absurd fleeting hope was that maybe my brother had spontaneously cut his trip short as a surprise and had just beaten me home. But I quickly realized how illogical that was. He hadn't texted or called all day. Plus, he was supposed to be off the grid anyway, lounging on tropical beaches surrounded by bikini-clad girls all week, not back here. No, someone else was upstairs in my house who absolutely did not belong there. Pulse racing, I grabbed the wooden baseball bat we always kept propped by the front door for protection. Creeping slowly up the carpeted steps, I paused cautiously on each one, listening intently for any clues I could discern. The muffled noises seemed to be coming from the back corner of the house where my bedroom was located. I had just reached the top landing when I heard it. The distinct squeak of my bedroom window hastily sliding open, followed by the unmistakable heavy thud of shoes hitting the grass below outside. There was now no question whatsoever. An intruder had broken in, had clearly been rummaging through my room just moments ago, and had dropped from the second story to escape out my window as soon as they detected me entering. I stood momentarily paralyzed at the top of the stairs, my clammy hands trembling around the bat's smooth wooden handle. A wave of nausea and dread washed over me as the chilling reality of the situation slowly sank in. Some complete stranger had been invading and defiling my most intimate inner sanctum, greedily pawing through my drawers, my clothing, my belongings. I felt so deeply violated and exposed. This space was supposed to be my private refuge, and now that sense of comfort and security had been utterly decimated knowing someone had so easily breached it. I hesitated about rushing outside to see if I could spot the criminal fleeing and possibly identify them. The idea of impulsively chasing this potentially dangerous and unhinged person alone into the darkness terrified me. They could easily still be lurking nearby hoping to ambush me as I followed them. But I knew before anything else I had to quickly check on my room firsthand and ensure all the doors were now locked up tight again. Gripping the bat tightly in clammy palms, I steeled my nerves and crept towards my bedroom. Nudging the door fully open with my foot, my worst fears were confirmed by the scene of absolute chaos and wreckage that awaited me inside. Dresser drawers were yanked completely out and overturned haphazardly on the floor, while clothing and personal items strewn wildly everywhere. Closet shelves were stripped bare, beds stripped of sheets and mattress, upended desk and bedside table drawers emptied out. The entire space looked like it had been hit by a destructive, greedy whirlwind. I stood in the doorway surveying the devastating mess, my heart sinking in my stomach. Whoever had been here had clearly been searching aggressively for anything valuable they could quickly grab. Jewelry, cash, small electronics, to pocket on their way out. I felt mildly relieved that I seemed to have arrived home just in time to have spooked them before they could actually make off with much. After doing a quick lap checking and double bolting all the window and door locks, I immediately dialed cops to report the break-in, hands still trembling as the adrenaline coursed through my veins. I could begin taking inventory of what exactly was stolen later. For now, my main relief was just getting home while the creep was still on the premises so I could properly secure the house before police arrived. The thought of having actually confronted the criminal face-to-face made bile rise in my throat. In the weeks following the disturbing burglary, I could barely eat or sleep, constantly hypervigilant to any odd sounds at night. I kept picturing waking to the sight of a shadowy figure looming over me, reaching for my neck. The very thought of being home alone made me positively ill with dread, as my previous sense of comfort and safety within these familiar walls had been completely shattered. I felt totally exposed and vulnerable even just existing in my own space. Eventually, the installation of new high-tech alarm systems, door locks, and security cameras coupled with cautious routines did finally help restore some semblance of normalcy. With time, I reclaimed ownership over my home, refusing to allow that vile intruder's actions to turn me into a permanent helpless victim. The criminal had taken enough without also indefinitely stealing my peace of mind and sanity.
Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.